Yeah,
she
same.
said. Pair of us. Super. So that's us live. I am Dr. Claire Gilray. This is Time to Talk, and I am joined today by Matilda Horn. Matilda and I connect because Matilda is the assistant, not the ass, um, women's rowing coach for CUBC. But you have done, I loved looking at your LinkedIn before I put your kind of little bio for today. You're an Olympian. You've done really special things. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your background in terms of ending up in this role?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on. And I'll take ass as long as it has bad in front of it.
Fabulous.
But yeah, no, so I'm the assistant women's coach at Cambridge for the rowing team. But I have been in this sport since I was in rowing since I was 11. So rowed initially and then coxed, which is, I think, a pretty unique role
Mm,
in sport. Definitely one that sort of bridges communication and skill level whilst trying to also be an athlete. So it's a really, yeah, that's a pretty fascinating role.
yeah.
And I went on to compete, as you mentioned, at the Olympics in COVID. So that was also an interesting
Mm,
experience. And then I've sort of always coached alongside, more for like experience and initially for money, and
yeah.
then have sort of progressed since coming out of coxing full time into coaching full time. I went to university and studied sports rehabilitation.
Okay.
So my interest previously was in wanting to become like a physiotherapist, musculoskeletal, or
Okay.
actually when I was younger, respiratory was what I was interested in.
Mm,
That's obviously really developed and changed, but I think my interest has always been in people and how people connect through not only to one another but with themselves through sport. So I think that coaching at university definitely gives you that. So
yeah.
that's something that this role has taught me a lot about, but also um, part of the reason I love my role so much is because I get to work with people who are trying to be excellent at rowing, and that's one part of the job, of course, but also trying to be excellent in multiple other fields. So supporting them in those areas as well.
Which is kind of very specific, isn't it, to that university rowing world in terms of, you're trying to have athletes row, train 3 times a day, but also hold together. Some there's several who are doing things like medicine, which means that they have full on days in terms of academic
Yeah,
stuff as well. And there's navigating all of that, isn't it, with them is
absolutely.
really, really difficult. It's not full time athlete world at all. They don't get that time to rest at all. So we were just talking before we came on in terms of what I guess I try to do in these kind of little interviews is maybe share some stuff that would be useful to people watching. And I guess obviously we've got the world of rowing, but I think a lot of what I thought we would end up talking about would be translatable across to just people. I'm going to make it quite female specific. Females who are trying to navigate the world of being athletes and how we can be the best that we can be, because I actually think that this has changed a lot. I don't know whether you'd agree with that in terms of just, I guess, knowledge around the difference we can make by doing, like, looking after simple things like our nutrition and our mental health. And I mean, you can probably tell that from your actual personal experience in terms of your career. Did you get support around nutrition? Has that always been there for you?
Um, as a university level, like our coaches were pretty amazing,
Okay.
but we didn't have specific nutritional support. We didn't have specific mental health support. We didn't have any. We were sort of gently signposted, but yeah, I completely agree. I think the world in which the knowledge has improved and sort of the desired requirement for it, I think that it's much more widely accepted and acknowledged that it is required, it is needed in order for people to be successful at an amateur level as well as at an elite level. And I don't mean amateur as in like novice, I mean amateur as in non-professional, right? So
Yeah.
at that level, I think it's hugely changed, especially I'm sure that social media has had a huge impact on that,
Yeah.
trying to navigate um information that sort of you're bombarded with, and trying to
Yeah.
navigate all of that information, but trying to do it in a scientific and structural way so that you are getting the right information for you, or for individuals.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the thing that I think I have loved seeing through CUBC is just also acknowledgement. I guess we're dipping into the red S space, so that relative energy deficiency in sport, which again, historically, I think coaching systems have done really badly or poorly at in
Mm.
terms of supporting athletes. You know, the vision has always been about getting the athlete to be as good as they can be in this particular moment. Whereas, you know, I see CUBC and I see other coaching kind of units now thinking ahead to actually this is could be detrimental for this female athlete in the future. This is not just about how they are right just now, particularly when it comes to weight. I mean, that's the whole minefield when it comes to rowing, I think. But
Oh, absolutely.
and how we look after this person as an ongoing as person holistically, not just for this event. I mean, do you think that's something that goes on now across the board, or do you think CUBC are fairly unique in terms of that? Feels like
I
it's
think there's
shifting everywhere.
more. Yeah, I think it's shifting. I think there's more
Yeah,
understanding of what Red S is, and I think there's also more understanding of, previously it would have been like overtraining or under
yeah,
recovery, and like, I think, or the female athlete triad, like things have just started to shift slightly, and I don't think it's irrelevant really to some extent what it's called. I think in Red
yeah,
S it's super important in terms of the title is important because of what it explains, relative
yeah,
energy deficiency syndrome. But I think that like it's sort of regardless of what it's called, I think the acknowledgement that it's present in multiple athletes, and exactly what you said there. I think what has shifted is, although people would acknowledge and try and change training previously, I think that, and maybe COVID taught us some of this, like people trying to come back too quickly, the long-term
yeah,
effects that can have.
yeah,
But actually, looking more into the future. Okay, right, we have a competition coming up in 6 weeks. Is that, rather than saying, right, what are we going to do to get that person ready? We're saying, okay, is that achievable? What might that look like? What might the long-term implications look like? How are we going to help this person? Because these people are adults, right? We can't make their decisions for them. So how are
yeah,
we going to help that person with all of the knowledge that we have available, coming to you, speaking to the physios, speaking to whoever we can, to make sure that this person has enough information without being bombarded, that they can make a decision on
yeah,
what they see fit for them over the next period of time. And that also, I think, is really important from a psychological point of view, because you're able to process things more effectively, maybe not quickly. I think that that's something really, really important to acknowledge.
yeah,
Like these athletes, when something's very hard, your dreams are being disrupted, you
yeah,
might not be processing quickly, but you have the tools to be able to process. So whether it takes a longer period of time or not, you actually are able to go through that processing, and then you have the support provided to you to be able to reach out and acknowledge what's happening to your body and what might be happening to your body for a short or long period of time, depending on the situation.
yeah. And I think it's interesting because absolutely we're talking about adults, but actually I don't know about you, but I wasn't necessarily an adult when I was at university, and that it is
No,
that transitional moment where it's transitioning into being able to make those decisions for yourself, isn't it? And actually, for a lot of people, um, almost they've kind of got away with what they've done in terms of that nutrition up to this point. It tends to find you out a little bit at this point, doesn't it? That's what,
oh, for sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because as things ramp up, you can start to see cracks occurring in people whenever they're not kind of looking after this piece. And I guess there's probably something that I think hopefully will filter through, because I've been doing some stuff with like even thinking about swimmers and things like that, and thinking about other sports that are trying to put some extra nutrition in earlier, so that that actually that's being thought about as a child in sport before you
Mm.
get to adulthood in sport. Because I think maybe that's probably the moment it needs to be put in. It's almost, we're coming in quite late when we're doing it at university stage.
Absolutely. I remember as a university student, and I'd come in, and I wasn't particularly big, so hence switching from rowing to coxing.
Yeah.
But I think that in my mind, I was like, well, it's great. I get to go to university. Lightweight rowing exists. I have an opportunity to be the weight I am naturally and compete and be competitive with other people that are similar size to me.
Yeah.
And so in my head, it was like the best opportunity. And everybody kept saying to me, it's great. You've got this amazing opportunity. I think I didn't have to manage my weight at that point in time. But I think that I then didn't think about the sort of implications of stepping up training volume. And actually, I wasn't hungry. Like, I was never hungry. So I was like, well, I'm not hungry, so I'm not going to eat. And that wasn't,
Yeah.
it was never sort of pointed out as, yeah, okay, everybody told you to eat lots of carbs. Great, cool. Everybody
Yeah.
says eat lots of protein, but how? The sort of fundamental process of like, actually, how on earth as a student am I going to get in enough food and volume when I have no money? What
Yeah.
can we do to, like, what can you do to be really prepared? And I think now I look at these athletes, they have so much information, they have so much knowledge, but they still come to university and they start doing, similar training to that of an elite athlete. They're training twice a day, then they're on their feet for the rest of the day, like you said, whether they're medics or whether they're in the lab, but especially to Cambridge, they're cycling everywhere. So there's extra fuel needed just for them to get to and from training, to and from lectures, to and from wherever it is they're going. And that doesn't come into their heads at all. And I think that the management of, like you said, I've got this far and it's worked. But actually, you do have to do something different, because what you are doing is different regardless of how it feels.
Yeah.
I think that's a really big one.
So we've done loads, haven't we, in terms of just actually getting people to fuel almost immediately, getting off the water, thinking about the nutrition through the rest of the day, thinking about proper kind of trying to get rest in there, trying to focus on sleep, those sorts of things, and just trying to think about ways people can navigate exactly that. Like if they're cycling from A to B, what is transportable in terms of nutrition? If they're kind of sharing kind of any kind of kitchen space and don't have any kind of freezer space, how do you navigate that world as well? And just trying to expand beyond the Tesco's meal deal into other things that same money could stretch to, that would probably be better in terms of fueling, is some of the kind of stuff that we've looked at, isn't it?
Yeah.
You mentioned kind of that mental health, mental headspace piece, which definitely I think the two do relate together. Like if we're under fueling, as you say, that impacts on everything. What do you see as being important things that we can be doing to support athletes' mental health? Maybe we're doing them already, but are things that you think have been most beneficial?
I think one of the really big things is that, and I sort of mentioned this to you before, but I think as a coach, you're in a privileged position that athletes want to come and talk to you. And so we don't want to change that, but we have to be able to educate ourselves so that athletes have the tools to be signposted effectively, so they can get the information they're sort of requiring or needing. And that might be relevant to the sport, but actually realistically these are university students, so 9 times out of 10 it's not related to the sport. And I think that things that we can be doing and things that athletes can be doing are really, really quite simple, like building in time where they can, which is a huge thing. Time is so precious. They're rushing around, but 5 minutes for them to write in a journal, acknowledge what was good about the day, whether it's related to the sport, whether it's related to their day that they had at university. It's just acknowledging these are the 2 things that today were really good. And so every day there's something there that's tangible that they can go back and look on and say, okay, that happened and that was good. And I think that probably is the biggest one. And then I think there are other things that you can do, again, that are simple, that don't require more than 5 minutes, such as actually just make sure in the evening you've planned your times that you have time to sit down and eat a meal, rather than you're eating a meal and you're on the go. Or maybe it's that in the evening you all sit down together and have a meal and then you go to bed, like see your friends, but really build a network so that, and that's hard to do, but build a network that once a week all the athletes have a dinner together. Once a week 5 of you have a dinner together. And I think it doesn't have to be around food, it can be creative. Like creativity is such a huge one. Lots of the athletes now, like they knit, they spend time like chatting to each other, but actually they're making bracelets. They spend time chatting to each other, but there's and you think, oh, I don't have time for that because I've got to hand this essay in. But if you do that once a week, or once a fortnight, and you make that a commitment, it's part of your timetable. And I think that's a huge one. It's like, make it part of the timetable, make it short, make it something achievable. And making it something achievable is super important. And for those athletes that actually being on their own is important, again, make it creative, painting or writing. Like, there are so many things. And I think lots of people think, oh, creativity, like I don't have time for that, but it creates so much composure, headspace. Listen to an audiobook rather than shoving on the TV. And sometimes you do just need to factor in 20 minutes for trashy TV too.
Yeah, I think there's something there just in all of those, is just a little bit of understanding what you need, isn't there? So, that kind of thing about knowing whether you need space on your own or whether you actually need time either with other rowers or whether you need time with people who are not rowers, whether that's time with family. Yes. There's a moment of just understanding what you need and then making it happen, as you say, giving yourself permission to make it happen, and understanding that actually by doing that, you're almost creating more headspace. It's not something that's sucking time from you. It actually gives back that time to you.
I remember the day that I learned about like your social battery, and like people talk about it in so many different ways, right? And it can be your bucket. How full is your bucket? Does it have holes in? Is stuff coming out of the sides? And I think, like, whatever the analogy is, the fact of the matter is, what is it that's giving you energy to keep going? What refills that mental battery so that you have the physical battery to keep going? If you don't take care of it, it can have a huge negative impact.
Yeah. And then really briefly, because time flies on these things, it's that, as you say, about that, I guess, going to the coach, but the coach also being aware that they've got somewhere to go in terms of sharing that appropriately and knowing where that boundary is in terms of not stepping into therapeutic kind of role with athletes, which is so tricky because you spend so much time together that line can be a bit blurry. But wonderful. These they go so quick, but they do. I always say at the end, if anyone's got any questions, feel free to message me and I can hand them over to Matilda. Thank you so much. I feel like maybe we could
pleasure. Thank you for having me on. Absolutely. I feel like we could talk forever about this.
Thanks for coming on.